Hey there, everyone. Welcome to A Slice of Life with Kellie and Jon. And today we have an amazing guest that we're both very excited about, Connie Ruel, who she has such a big story. She's done so many different things that we'll probably talk about a lot of different things. Her family history, her Italian heritage, her award-winning restaurants, her cookbook, art. She's an artist. So we've
Yeah,
got lots to talk about here today. So thanks for joining us, Connie.
my pleasure. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So, and while we're talking, I'm told you're going to make something for us because she's
Sure.
from the restaurant business and chef and
Nothing like multitasking,
a
right?
good
well,
cook.
That's right.
Yeah.
Why don't you start off with what got you into being a chef in the first place?
I was born and raised into a restaurant. My father owned a restaurant, a couple restaurants over a 40-year period, and I guess it's osmosis. It just kind of once you're in it, I don't think you can ever get out of it.
Well,
Even though now,
these
go
weren't
ahead.
just regular Italian
Yeah.
restaurants. These were very well-known, famous Italian restaurants in Hollywood, specifically in Hollywood, California, starting from the 30s up until I guess the 70s. Would
Yeah,
that be?
late 70s.
There you go.
Yeah. Actually, even I think the last one isn't, well, one's still going. What are we talking about? All of our
Yeah, that's
restaurants
What
true
are
are
the
though.
names
still
of the restaurants?
functioning. Oh,
What are the names?
the Casa de Amor was my father's restaurant in Cahuenga, where all the movie stars used to hang out back in the golden age of Hollywood. And then my Uncle Patsy, who was partners with Frank Sinatra, had a restaurant called the Villa Capri, which is right under Capitol Records. So I remember as a child looking up and marveling at Capitol Records. And after they would do recordings, they'd always come and hang out at the Villa Capri having dinner. And Frank Sinatra was famous for being there frequently, as well as most of the paisano Italian actors and performers. And we brought the very first pizza to California in 1939. My father brought that to the Casa de Amor. Then they opened up an actual pizza place at the farmers market, which is still there, run by my cousin Filomena. It's now 82 years, I believe, in the running. And she is, of course, second generation running it. And you can still get the famous first pizza brought from New York back in the day. So
So
my
was it
father
square
came.
or round? The square
It was
tray?
round,
Round?
round.
Okay,
Yeah,
round
Round. Oh
pizza.
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's still the same recipes. In fact, I wrote a cookbook, and I could talk about that later. But in the cookbook, I have the original recipes for their pizza dough that was written in the Better Home and Garden magazine. I think in 1962, they did a feature on some of their recipes from the restaurants. So I have actually taken those, giving credit to Better Homes and Gardens as well, in my cookbook. So it's kind of fun to see those old time recipes, the marinara sauce and the actual dough, and talking about how they did it. I think eggplant parmigiano is one of them, but it's great to have that history. From what is that, 65 years ago or 60 years ago?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the dough is so important. So where I grew up in
yeah,
Ohio, there's a lot of Italians. It's a very heavy Italian population in that whole area. I think Dean Martin was from very
Yeah.
close to where I grew up. I think he was Italian, was he? But anyway,
Yes.
um, lots of Italians. I married an
Latino.
Italian. My stepfather was an
Actually,
Italian.
he
My
was
sister married an
Dean.
Italian,
Dino was from Steubenville, as a matter of fact.
which is very close to where I grew up. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
very
Well, you
close.
look Italian. That's the
I'm
best
not
compliment you'll
Italian
ever
at
get,
all. I
right?
have
But
no
you look
Italian in
Italian.
me. But I grew up with Italians and I love the culture and the food and family. And
Mhm.
anyway, we had two pizza shops in town and they're both gone. They've been replaced with other Italian pizza shops. But growing up as a kid, we would go to these pizza shops and they were the big square trays because it was probably you can make more pieces, in the big square tray. And one of the guys, Orlando, would give us all the kids got a little piece of dough to play with while we waited. So anyway, fond memories and just the Italian culture. It's in my bones and I love it and always have been um fascinated with how loving and giving the Italian people are. And the nanas, cooking, and they're so happy to cook and make you, they that's their love. Cooking for you
Yeah.
is love.
Well, Connie, then when did you obviously you then went to Europe, if I remember correctly, before opening up your first restaurant, or
I did. I was in Switzerland for 9 years, and before that, I was in Sri Lanka for 3 years.
Oh,
Learned a lot about cooking, such a diverse cultural cooking. And I was managing in hotels and restaurants in Switzerland until I came back to the US. And I opened my restaurant after doing a stint as the culinary director at Sokolblosser Winery and running a tasting room. And then I opened my first restaurant in 1997 in Portland, Oregon.
okay.
And then I opened other restaurants. I had 3 restaurants there, and then came to Colorado, sold my restaurants, came to Colorado, and had 2 more restaurants here. And that's where I am now. And I'm in a small town called Niwot, Colorado, not far from Boulder.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
So you've been around. What took you to Switzerland initially and Sri Lanka?
Well, I'd say an airplane, but that would be kind of cheeky.
yeah,
Long stories had to do with my mother and my stepfather were doing fish import and export in Sri Lanka. It's a very long story, but I ended up going there, wanting to be there for 6 months. I have a knack for learning languages, and I really wanted to learn a language that was not a romantic language, and learning Sinhalese. And it was a dream of mine, and I ended up staying for 3 years, and I ended up marrying a Sri Lankan
Ah,
later, but I met him there at that time.
ah.
And then from there, he was touring Europe, and I went to visit him in Switzerland. I totally fell in love with Switzerland. I just felt so at home. I was fluent in their dialect in 6 months.
Wow.
And it's still a part of me. It's still part of who I am, is partially Swiss. I'm very Italian, but partially Swiss. No blood, but definitely
International. An
love
international
it.
woman.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because my father was born in Italy, so I am first generation American.
Wow.
But
And then your
ages ago.
father also had a Hollywood ties, other than the restaurant.
oh yeah,
He
he was
did.
an actor.
The hip Hollywood crowd of the time.
More than that, because before Hollywood became Hollywood, he was born in 1893. He was 67 when I was born, so definitely an older father. And he toured America as a vaudevillian in the 20s and 30s. And then in the 30s, mid 30s, he went to Europe and toured Europe as a vaudevillian. He was an acrobat. And actually came back to America in 39. They opened the restaurant. And then he went on to do bit parts in movies and shows. He was in Passage to Marseille with Humphrey Bogart. He was in some television shows that some people might not even remember, a show called Toma. He played some bit parts here and there, but he was actually really being a producer. So he produced his first movie, his only movie, in 1948 in Italy, which never, long story, and never hit the theaters. But last year, I actually put a premiere on for him because he never got his premiere. So I rented a theater and we did the premiere of his movie, which was amazing for me. It was like something I always wanted to do.
How fun.
I
mean, he
know.
passed away in the 80s.
Yeah, I know. Connie's heard me tell this story before, but when I lived in LA back at the turn of the century, one of the things that I was lucky enough to be able to do was I was invited to the Friars Club in Beverly Hills when it still existed, and I was on a line of 10 or 12 people with another 10 or 12 behind me. I was going to be introduced to Milton Berle, who was sitting on a large sofa and just meeting people, shaking their hands, and they'd move away. And when I was introduced to him by my friend, Charlie Gardino, he says, Milton, this is John Diamore, and he'd love to meet you. And Milton said, Diamore, I knew a Diamore. They had a restaurant here in Hollywood, but I remember a guy I did a vaudeville show with all across the country. And I mean, I don't care how old it was only a year or two before he passed away. I don't care how old he was. The man knew the names of the theaters, Franklin's, which is Connie's father, Franklin's, specifically his act.
Wow.
and it was just so, and he told all the other people behind me, go away, I'm talking to this kid.
Oh,
And so I must have sat there for 15 minutes with this icon of
gigantic.
the
Yeah,
industry
bizarre.
who just couldn't stop talking about Connie's father and the family that they were surrounded with. So there you go. I just wanted to throw that in. Back to you,
I
Connie.
love that. Yeah. Love that.
Yeah. So
So
later in life, even as he was older, he ran a restaurant. He just couldn't stop. He ran even a little sandwich shop toward the end, and when in his late 80s, and he was a beast. He was an amazing man for
Wow.
sure.
Wow. And so then you got having grown up, I get it. I worked in restaurants and I could walk into any restaurant right now and start bussing tables and I can go back in the kitchen and find everything because they're all basically the same. And it's just such
Pretty
a
much.
family environment and fun environment. So you have the bug, and you've owned your own restaurants. And did I hear that you've won awards? Did you?
We got Restaurant of the Year in 2002 with my second restaurant in the Oregonian, which was back then it was like the Oscars of the restaurant industry. We did do a dinner at the James Beard House. We were invited to appear there. We were just kind of like in the forefront of the restaurant world in the Northwest, which was really great. It was a great experience. So I mean, I also had awards in different kinds of beverage competitions, and I loved pairing food and wine, and yeah, it was a great career. I have recently been out of it, in only that I sold my last restaurant and started getting passionate about art. So been painting like crazy, and kind of that upset. You know how restaurant people are. You work 17 hours a day, 7 days a week. You live and breathe working. That's what you are, because it's not what you do, it's really what you are. And I wouldn't even call it work. It gives me so much joy. And so since I had to sell my last restaurant, I had to sell it because I have some arthritis issues that are keeping me from doing the things I like to do. So I sold the last restaurant and poured all of that crazy obsession into art, and I've been doing that now for about 6 years. It's been super fun.
Oh,
In
wow.
fact, I'm going to start throwing some stuff together as we're talking so you can kind of
Okay.
see what I'm doing, if that's okay with you. And
Yes.
the reason I'm doing that, because it's going to help talk a little bit about some of this other art stuff that I do.
Oh,
So
okay. Tie it in together.
I'm actually going to do a recipe, super easy recipe that's great during the holidays, especially because you're always having people over and people love to snack, and they love to have things that are interesting and something that's not store-bought. So if you want to make your own spiced nuts, it's super
Oh,
easy to do, and you can do so many different features of this, or different ingredients that you would make different flavors. But the base is here. And throw in whatever you want to throw. If you want to throw in cayenne pepper, throw in cayenne pepper. Right? And there's
oh, wow.
the recipe book itself talks about spice nuts being the very autumny sort of spice nuts. So I'm gonna show you real quick how to do that. It goes in the oven for 4 different cycles of 15 minutes. So we'll just keep talking. So my cookbook is basically not really a cookbook, but a memoir cookbook. It's a stories of being a restaurateur of the rest. It was written before I had my 5th restaurant, and I did a Chopped episode in 2016. So the book was written before then. So it has different stories about being a restaurateur, and then the recipes were catalysts from the story. So the nut section is, as you can see, this copy, I don't know if you guys can see that, is very loved. It's very worn. I use my own cookbook a lot, which people think that's crazy because I wrote recipes. Why do I need the cookbook? But you always refer back to, what worked really well for you. So we're going to start really, really quick. I want to talk about egg whites because it's so much fun to be an artist. I discovered egg tempera. And egg tempera is an art. You make your own paint out of egg. And it's an art that used to be in the huge. I mean, if you've ever seen Botticelli's painting, the Birth of Venus, it's the one where she's in the shell. That's egg tempera. That thing's huge. And egg tempera is not an easy medium to work with. Long story short, so whenever I have leftover, because you can only use the yolk, I always have a bunch of leftover whites. So I use all my whites I just made, my husband loves angel food cake. And I have an awesome recipe for angel food cake. And if anybody wants it, you can contact me. I'll send it to you. It's one that I wrote and tweaked a little bit. And so I have a bunch of egg yolks. I use that. But for this, we're going to use egg whites. We're just going to take 1 pound of mixed nuts. I don't know if you can see that. I can't see me, so I don't know if you can see that. But it's almonds and pecans. And you can see it finished. But this is raw. And I have 1 pound of it. I'm just going to throw 1 egg white in there. So this will be all. So I'm just going to mix them up a little bit. It just kind of gets sticky. What this is going to do is hold all your spices onto it. So once you know you have to do this, anything else you put in there is up to you. So I like to do a little bit of amaretto, because I love to do alcohol in anything that I bake. It's about a tablespoon. I'm going to cheat and do the chef thing where I'm just going to guesstimate a tablespoon.
But on the on something like that with such a small amount, and then you bake it, it loses the alcohol.
Right, there's no alcohol.
It cooks
you
out.
can gift your kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
Darn
So
it.
it's just the flavor of the amaretto that's
Right.
behind it.
Right.
Great. Okay.
So let's say you like hazelnut. You could put hazelnut liqueur. You could put whiskey and make a whiskey nut. That's really good. Like you say, alcohol dissipates even more so because it doesn't have as much stickiness in it. So then we're going to throw in 1/2 cup of brown sugar. Oh, sorry. Put that in a different bowl. 1/2 cup of brown sugar. I want you to be able to see what I'm doing here. I just pre-measured these just so you know. We have 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. Just look at my recipe.
Oh, my favorite flavors.
I have a teaspoon of salt.
Yeah.
I have a 1/2 teaspoon of Chinese 5-spice.
Oh, I don't know.
And a 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg. So it's imagine all those spices. Yum. So good. Just mix it all together with your sugar. So let's say you wanted to go outside of the box. You could throw in even sesame seeds in here if you wanted to. You could throw just to give it a little coating on top of your nuts. You could do, that didn't sound right. You could do, is this a family channel?
No.
Okay, good. So I have free reign, right?
That's right.
So once you get it all mixed up, just pour it over the nuts that you have your egg whites on. Toss it up. Be tossed.
Yeah.
And then I'm just going to pour this onto a cookie sheet. You don't want to prep your cookie sheet. You don't want to do anything like that. It's just a basic cookie sheet. We're just going to make them onto a flat. You guys see that? Flat surface.
Yep.
Yeah. It's so easy. It looks pretty easy.
Yeah, and then we'll
Quick
just
and
pop this
easy.
in the oven.
I like that. I like easy. Wow.
15 minutes.
Okay.
And in 15 minutes, we'll go back. So you pull them out every 15 minutes. You use a straight spatula, flip them around, flatten them out, put them back in. You do that 4 times, they're done.
Wow.
When they come out, and they'll separate. You kind of pull them apart a little bit, and then you have a thing of nuts.
Nice snack.
Super easy. And then the flavor is amazing. And if you want to put different spices in there, you could even put fennel seeds. You could put, I mean, the sky's the limit. You could put anything in there.
Is it best to wait until they cool to eat them, or warm?
Absolutely. When they first come to the oven, they're kind of sticky because the brown sugar hasn't really solidified. And it goes really fast. You can separate it on your thing. You'll hear they sound hollow. I don't know if you hear that. It sounds hollow. When you first put it out of the oven or take it out of the oven, it's a little bit sticky and dense. And then as they dry, they become like that. And they're super crunchy and they're actually quite delicious. And if you like macadamia nuts, do it with macadamias. Same recipe.
Right.
Just others, like I said, the sky's the limit. You put anything in there you like. Of course, within reason. You don't want to put a chicken in there with it or something. But you can use these. You can use these for so many things. You can put them as salad toppers. Yeah. You can chop them up and throw them into your chocolate chip cookie dough. You can. I mean, there's so much you can do with these. There's a bazillion ways to use this. Just throw them on top of your ice cream after you put a topping. And I mean, that's why I like to show people how to do this, because it's endless possibilities.
Yeah.
So,
And just, I like that it seems quick and easy, fairly easy.
super easy.
You gotta
Yeah,
just
super
mix
easy.
everything up and put them in the
Yeah.
oven.
So I want, give
Not
me
too
1 second. I just want to rinse my hands off real quick.
Yeah, they must
We
be
could-
sticky with egg whites and amaretto.
Yeah, a little sticky, because I want to show you. So, egg tempera is super, super fun to work with. And I have, this is a painting that I did using egg tempera. I don't know if you can see that. Can you
Oh,
see that?
wow, that's beautiful. So, what is egg tempera?
Egg tempera is a way. So instead of doing oil like for oil paints, you use the egg yolk with your pigments, your powdered pigments, to make your paint. And it dries very, very quickly. It's not like oil paint where you can sit and cream it on and you know, blend it and all that. It's more like if watercolor and oil paints got married, they'd have egg tempera as a
So
baby.
you're making your own paint. You make your
You
own
make your own paint as you go.
colors. Wow, I've never
Super
heard of
fun.
that. Okay.
Super, super fun. A lot of the paintings that you see in the Louvre, anything before the 14th century, most probably was egg tempera, because
Would
oil
that be
had.
because it not just a texture, but it also gave it a coating of some sort to make the paint last?
It
Possibly?
does. It's actually the most archival painting. I mean, they found things on and from Egyptian casks that are egg tempera from like 500 AD that are in pristine color and pristine condition. Whereas oil, it's also the surface you put it on. It'll crack and it'll, you know, I mean, egg tempera will crack a little too, but it's more hardy. I mean, think about it. If you eat an egg, you make, let's say, over easy egg, and the next morning you want to clean your plate. If you forget to put it in the sink, you have to scrub that stuff off. So yeah, it's definitely, it's like cement pretty much.
Huh.
So,
I
yeah.
would never have thought of that. I would never heard
Anyway,
of that. That's awesome.
super fun.
Wow.
Super, super fun.
Yeah.
So as a chef, it's fun for me because I can still crack my eggs and make my own paint. I mean, I do work with oil. I work with oil more than I work with egg tempera, but it's just so much fun. And like I said, when I have leftover egg whites, I can make nuts. I can make cake. I can make.
Wow.
Super fun.
Do you have any paintings you can show us? Any handy or no?
They're out in my studio. I actually have a studio in the back of my house, so I only brought that one in because it was egg tempera.
Well,
I do a
we
lot of
could do
portraits. You can go to
we
my
could do
website.
an episode
Okay.
of
Okay.
just your art, and we could do it from your
There you
studio.
go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah, if you go to my website, it's segregated into being an author because of my cookbook, and I'm in the process and have been for a while of writing a dystopian novel. And then there's another section about being an artist and another about being a chef. So you can see the episodes. I was on Guy's Grocery Games, so you can see the episodes to be able to look up how to watch the actual episode itself. And then the Chopped show that I was on.
Is that Guy Fiero's show? Guy Fiero?
Yeah, Guy Fieri.
I love his spaghetti sauce.
Yeah, he did the guys. I think he still runs it. That was in 2014 that I appeared. That was 10 years ago. Time flies. But and that was in Santa Clara, whereas Chopped was recorded in New York City.
Huh. Wow.
Food Network used to be above the Chelsea Market. The whole top floor of Chelsea Market was the network itself, and I think they recently moved.
How did you end up being on those shows? Like, how did that happen?
Well, it's kind of a fun story because I used to watch them because it was, you know, as a chef, it's interesting, it's fun to watch whenever I had time to watch TV. And my daughter said, "Mom, you should try to be on that show. You're so great about going into grocery stores and being spontaneous, and you can make anything out of nothing." And I'm like, I'm not going to go on that show. It's like being on a game show. And she goes, "Oh, come on, just try." So I thought, I'll send it in. I won't get picked anyway. I sent it in, and they chose me. And then they liked me so much from that show, they invited me back to come to Chopped and do that 4 years later. And
Awesome.
that's fun. It's great for the restaurant. It was a great way to get your name out there, and to people love to see that. And I'll never forget. We came back from the episode. It was right when they showed it. They showed it around Thanksgiving, and then they would always show reruns. Every time a rerun comes on, I'll have a plethora of people wanting to be Facebook friends. I can always tell when a rerun comes on. But the show was coming up, and I was in my chef's garb, and I was at Costco, and I was grabbing stuff for the restaurant back when I owned the restaurant. And they have those big screen TVs that are in the entrance. And I look up there, and there's my episode. So there's me on this huge screen, like cooking in a chef's jacket. And I walk in the door, and I have my cart, and I look up, and this man next to me, he looks at the screen, and he looks at me, and he goes, he goes like, yeah.
That's
So
great.
it's kind of fun.
Fun. Yeah, that sounds like
Connie, what about your book, your cookbook? You have it there, and where can we get it? Because
If you want
I need another copy. My copy was
so you can get it on my website.
yeah.
Followtherule.com, spelled RUEL. I give hard copies there, or if you prefer to have a Kindle, you can get that on Amazon.com. Just put follow Passions of a Restaurateur, and they have it on Kindle there.
Great.
That's great.
So,
yeah, awesome.
But hard copies are.
What's
What
your
else are you
favorite
doing?
thing to make ever?
Oh.
What? Given the opportunity
gosh.
to make something that you enjoy preparing and then eating, what would it be? I'm sure it's not a simple plate of spaghetti.
That's a hard one. People have asked me if I was going to be hung tomorrow and I was offered my last meal, what would it be? That's different than the one I would cook. Like my favorite thing to cook. My favorite things to cook is anything I make with sous vide. And that's a whole other story in itself.
With
Sous
what?
vide is a sous vide, which means under pressure in French. It's basically a process of cooking something in a vacuum sealed bag. And it can be anything. I mean, you can even make ice cream in this. But it cooks at a continuous temperature for a certain amount of time, depending on what it is you're cooking. And let's say you're going to make carrots, as an example. So you take whole baby carrots, you just cut off their tops, and you put them in a vacuum bag, and whatever you want them to taste like, besides being carrots, you put in with it. Mm-hmm. So let's say you would put butter, and some sort of fat's really good to put in there. So butter, maple syrup, a little bit of cinnamon, and then you vacuum seal the bag, and you submerge it into it's actually a gadget that's a sous vide gadget. It keeps a continuous temperature rotating within the pan that you're putting it in, submerged in water, of course. So the water is you have to know the temperatures at which something will break down and cook and how long you can cook it. Once you know that, it's a breeze to use. But what happens is when you have that in the bag, it goes in there, the carrot, when you cook it in water, it dissipates and all of the vitamins and everything goes into the water and it's gone, right? Well, in the bag, the vitamins and the flavor comes out and gets forced back in because it's vacuumed. So the end product is the carrots on steroids. It's so good. And after that, you want to caramelize it basically. So just throw it in the pan real quick. It caramelizes everything on it. If I made for you a boiled carrot and then made that next to it and just did boiled carrots with just, cinnamon and those flavors on it, worlds apart. So I love to cook sous vide. If you're going to do a steak and you want it to be medium rare, you go to a restaurant, you throw a steak on the grill, it's going to cook in only so far as, let's say you want it medium rare. It'll be well till medium rare in the very center. But if you sous vide it will be a perfect medium rare at 145 degrees is medium rare. You pull that out of the bag, it's to one end to the other, just sear the outside. You have a beautiful seared outside. The entire center is medium rare. So it's a whole different way to cook. So it's my favorite way to cook. And it's foolproof. It always comes out perfect.
Are there any places or around you or in America that cook this way?
Any of your fine dining restaurants these days are cooking sous vide. It's just the way that it goes now. There's also Charlie Parker, that's his name, right? He was kind of famous for it. I have actually his cookbook. It's called the Sous Vide Cookbook. But they kind of started it about 20, 30 years ago. And it's just become now even the main cook, you can get it, you can buy a gadget in Costco. I mean, it's
right. Isn't it a
now.
countertop, like oven looking thing? I've seen it online. It's Something like
No,
that.
it's kind of a wand,
Oh,
and
okay.
you put it into your water into a pot, and
Okay.
then you need to vacuum. So if you don't have a vacuum sealer like you would use for your freezer stuff, you can actually just take a Ziploc bag, whatever you have in there, and submerge it in water, and the air comes out until you get to the tip, and then you just Ziploc it, and you can
Right.
use that. So there's ways of not having to have all the fancy gadgets. There's a way to do it. When I had my last restaurant, I focused on cooking classes. So people would come in, I'd teach them how to use the sous vide, or I would teach them how to do knife skills or how to get the best budget. Like if you have a chicken and you buy it for, let's say, $10, if you want to get all the things you can get out of that chicken, you're going to spend separated in a grocery store, you're going to spend $30. So I tried to teach people, if you have a $10 chicken, I can get you I can get you chicken stock, I can get you legs and thighs, and you have the you can make pate, you can, and there's so many things you can make out of a chicken, where people don't understand that. Yes, it's time consuming, but it depends on what's worth it. You know, if a housewife comes home and maybe she works during the day all day and she comes home and she doesn't want to cook, well, instead of watching TV, she might want to prep a chicken. She's got 3 meals, and it's like for pennies on the dollar. So my goal was to teach better ways of cooking, more nutritious, not packaged. And I did 3 cooking classes a week, and they were pretty successful. I mean, I sold out every time because people want to learn
Yeah.
how to eat better, cook better, smarter, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But my favorite food, so I'm going to be hung tomorrow, would be boniato with, that's my dog, sorry.
That's okay.
Just a second. Can you? Lamb shank. And if you cook your lamb shank and braise it for hours and hours and let it reduce, you can actually take a fresh fig, let it soak in that. So when you pull the fig out, you're ready to eat your meal. If you cut into that fig, it bursts with demi-glaze. Oh, best thing ever.
I would
Okay.
never know anything like that. I would.
I would
I'm like,
never
what?
think of anything like that.
Yeah.
So good.
Okay, now I know that we have some people, who watch our episodes, who are, and it's not for me. I am a hardcore omnivore, but they are vegans and vegetarians.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, if I'm not mistaken, just what you have in the oven is good for that, right? I mean,
It's not vegan because it has egg whites, but it is
ah,
vegetarian.
that's right.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
right. Okay.
So that you always have to be careful of. And
You
being in a
had
restaurant these days, being a restaurateur is very difficult because there's
right.
so many dietary issues. So
Have
I don't know
you
if
had
you've heard.
to expand your repertoire to deal with vegans or vegetarians to any degree?
Most definitely. I used to do multi-course winemaker dinners at wineries, and there was always people write in, well, you're doing 6 courses and it's a fixed meal, but I don't do this and I don't eat that, and I'm allergic to this and I'm allergic to that. And organizing that for, say, 65 people in a 6-course dinner where you don't even have a kitchen because you're in the middle of somebody's winery, it's definitely a challenge. And you have to be so creative to try to emulate a flavor that, if you're pairing wine and food and you want that flavor profile to be the same, not using these things, you better be pretty creative. Like if you want it to make a portobello mushroom taste like a steak, how do you do that? You know, and then there's ways to do that. My alarm is going off here.
See how they're
Okay,
doing.
so we've gone 15 minutes and they look like this. They're kind of sticky. Can you see that?
Yep.
So it kind of looks to you like they're stuck to the pan, which they are really not, because there's so much sugar that it's kind of just caramelizing. So you just flip them around
Stop
and
drooling,
then
Kelly.
flatten them out.
They
I am
sound
so sending you some nuts. I'm telling you that. I send you some nuts. Got to give me your mailing address so I get them to you. Shake it a little bit, throw it in for another 15 minutes.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to make them too because they just seem like something quick and easy. But even at Christmas, you put them in little bags with a bow and give them as gifts.
That's what I do. Everybody
Little
gets
gifts.
nuts for me for Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, one year I infused a bunch of liquors And I called it Connie's Concoctions. And they got these little vials. It was about 2.5 ounces in each vial. And they were in like this little box that they would hold them up straight and sponge base. And they open it up and they have these little individual shots of very unique infusions. I love doing that stuff for Christmas. It's different. It's something that comes from your heart.
Mhm.
And it's easy to do. You just give a day to it, like an afternoon, put it all together and you're set.
Yep.
Definitely less expensive too, if you really look at it.
Well, I think people appreciate it though, because it's so unique.
Mhm.
At Christmas time, you're bombarded with everybody's buying each other gifts and they're going to the store and getting things. But if you get something homemade that you can't get anywhere, you can't get it at the store, I think people
Yeah.
appreciate it more.
Well,
Yeah.
even I'm sure you can get these somewhere, Harry and David's, but it's so much better when
Yeah,
it comes
homemade
from
is always
somebody
better.
who makes it. Yeah, and
Yeah.
when you're talking like somebody like Connie, who is a chef who
Yeah.
made something like that, it's
Yeah.
even more special.
Yep.
So
And this year I'm going to make. I bought a little kiln, so I can actually make ceramics, and it's small. I can only make small things. So I haven't decided yet what I'm going to make. We were talking, my sister and I were talking the other day about maybe doing some soap dishes or something fun, but they're made from the heart. And if you go to their house and know what their colors are, your friends' colors, and you make it and you carve their name in on it or something, it's something that they'll keep forever. Whereas you go to Target and you pick up something there, a little soap dish, you give it to them,
Yeah.
it'll be in the next garage
Not the
sale.
same. Yeah. Not the same. Yep. Homemade's always best, I think.
absolutely.
I think. Yeah.
So tell us more about. I'm interested about your book. I really would like to promote your book because I know it's a great cookbook.
Yeah. What
And
are
should I
the
should I tell
categories of
everybody?
food?
No, don't tell everybody about that. But
Should I tell everybody?
no,
What? What?
Well, can I, John?
of course.
Let her tell. Let her
I
tell.
didn't. That wasn't the reason I was
I
saying
know
it.
that
I really
wasn't.
wanted to promote your book, but
I know that.
if
Well,
people,
John is actually in my book, but that's okay because my dad is in his book, so we're good.
I didn't know that.
that's
So
right.
what are
Connie
you in
is
the
my
book?
third. Technically, she's my third cousin. Her father was my father's first cousin. They were first
Okay.
cousins, and during the 70s, when I would wind up out in California a lot during my music business days, her father and he was just wonderful to me, and so was her uncle Patsy, but unfortunately he passed away in 75. But her dad Franklin was just so good to me, and that's all I could say. He was a wonderful man. It was an honor to know him, and I wrote about him in my book. The Boss
So
Always Sits Back.
there is
Oh,
John in my book.
Hans.
And apparently when Connie was looking to put her book out, I think my book had just come out recently.
The Boss, yeah,
Yeah.
2014. Yeah.
And she wanted a little help and knowledge on getting her own book out. And since I had just gone through the headache of self-publishing my first book, I was happy to help her. But that's A,
Yeah.
what cousins do, and B, what friends do for friends anyway.
Right.
So yeah, but Connie, talk about the book and other recipes that you've talked about. I mean, we need to talk for another 10 or 15 minutes while these nuts are roasting here on an open fire. So
Well, what
Well,
I'm curious about is what are the different kinds of dishes that you have in the book? Like, are they meals? Are they snacks? Desserts?
because some people
everything?
have said they found it was a little because it is a restaurateur's book. There are some recipes that they wouldn't make at home, but then there are recipes that are base recipes. Like if you don't know how to do your basic teriyaki sauce, I put my version of teriyaki in there, or chimichurri, or mayonnaise, or hollandaise, or all base recipes are in there as well. So, like I said before, the book is based on being a restaurateur and the fun things and the stories that happen. Being in the restaurant business it's crazy. I mean, crazy things happen. I have so many more stories, and this book should be like that thick. not that thick. Because so many nutty things happen, and a lot of them are so inappropriate you can't put it in a book. But when you have so many things to tell, it's crazy how I remember all of these stories created a recipe. Or maybe the recipe was created and I remember there being a story attached in somehow. So the first half of the book is some about my dad and his restaurants and his history of being a vaudevillian. So interesting. I found it fascinating. I mean, even the fact that my sister and I are here, in that he was 67 when I was born, and he was never supposed to have children. I mean, that in itself is, I tell a little bit about that story, but then the recipe is attached to a recipe that he had from his restaurant. Again, that was in the Better Homes and Garden, because growing up with him, we didn't have recipes. And because he was so much older, I was 21 when he passed away. So I wish I had him in my later life as I became a chef, that I could have, picked his brain. Because unfortunately, they didn't write the recipes down. Luckily, Better Homes and Garden did. So it's in there. They had to write it for Better Homes and Garden. So that's in there. And then each restaurant I had was very different. So the recipes that are in here are very diverse. You have desserts, you have nuts, you have protein, you have vegetarian dishes, you have all the things that I might have needed when I was in my restaurant. I have a story in here about stealing some grape leaves off of somebody's yard and getting caught. So fun stories. You can see me like hiding in the night and stealing things for my dinner. And, I call it a felon for a fig because I was stuffing figs inside grape leaves as a dessert. So it's like a goat cheese. So I have that recipe in the cookbook. There's some, but a lot of times gluten-free people have the hardest time eating dessert because or even dairy-free people have a hard time with desserts, because what is there, right? Especially gluten-free, unless you're doing specific gluten substitutes. So I have a couple recipes that are gluten-free desserts because it's so hard to find. And then stories like I was doing some oxtail. Have you ever had oxtail before? It's fabulous. My mom, as a kid, my mom used to make it, and I used to love it. My stepfather owned a meat packing plant, and we used to eat every part of the cow you could possibly, things you don't want to think about, that we would eat because there was always nobody else wanted to buy it. Like, who wants the tail, right? So my mom used to cook these crazy things, and she was a pretty good cook, probably not as good as my dad, but she was a good cook. And I remember as a kid eating oxtail, loving it. So I went to go buy some oxtail because I want to do them as a special in my fourth restaurant. So I go down to the butcher, the restaurant butcher, basically, and I take home this big carton of oxtail, thinking it's going to be like what you see in the store, segments of round oxtails. And I get it back, and there's two massive tails in this box, and I'm like, holy moly, I got to butcher this down, and I have to have it ready for specials tonight. Well, this stuff takes forever because it's like you have to braise it forever. And so I talk about the whole story. It's very comical of what happened, and of course, oxtail recipes in there. So that's kind of how the book works. And stories of my cousins. I would call my aunt and uncle because they were much older than me, because of course my father was older, but they were unfortunately murdered in LA. And so they had a restaurant in LA itself. And so I very carefully write this story because I certainly wouldn't want anyone to be devastated or insulted by the things that actually happened. So I actually got the recipe for his rosette cookies, which he was famous for. He used to do all the baking for all the stars. Like I have a photograph of him with Lauren Bacall because he made her birthday cake. And Natalie Wood, James Dean, he used to do birthday cakes for the stars, and or wedding cakes or anniversary cakes. So as a young person, I used to watch him do his little Italian rosettes. So I have the recipe for the Italian rosettes. And I had a blog that I ran for a long time, playing with the stories that I have in this book. And to this day, in fact, last week I got one, and that was 10 years ago. I had somebody who commented about that story because they used to go to the restaurant all the time And of all of the stories I wrote on that blog, that one I've had probably 30 or 40 comments of people saying how they were devastated by what happened to them,
Mhm.
and that they used to frequent the restaurant, and they were wonderful people. Did you know Sabby and Jenny,
Oh,
John?
I knew Sebby well. I used to go to that restaurant and with Joey, our cousin Joe,
Yeah.
and eat there. And if you remember, I was at Sebby's when
Oh
when what
yes, of
to
course,
them happened to
of
them. I was
course.
at the funeral. But I was
Yeah,
just thinking of two things that to get off that story. There
yeah.
were two things I wanted to that I remembered while you were talking, even though this one isn't too great. But her dad, like she said, he was born before 1900, and during World War One, he was his battalion or his troops were he was in a mustard gas. He right wasn't he
Right.
during with mustard gas, and they said that this guy would never his body was shot, and it just made him become this muscular, unbelievably good looking, strong man. He just used that. Whatever they told him would happen because of the mustard gas didn't apply to him at all. And it was quite fantastic when you would hear him tell the story. Here you go.
Oh,
This
wow.
was one of his promo pictures
Wow.
during his heyday in vaudeville. If and hope the folks can see that fig leaf there. It's a rather large fig leaf.
This is 1912.
Wow.
Wow. So
Yeah,
that was even before the first war.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow. Okay.
yeah.
The other story that I wanted to tell was, now I'm a little older than Connie, so she wouldn't know this. But in 1955, mom and dad took me there to California to be the guests with Connie's aunt and uncle at the opening day of Disneyland in 1955. In July of 55, I was one of the first kids wheeled in my little crib, in a little push cart or whatever it was. And but during that trip, as Connie knows, James Dean used to like to go to the family restaurant, but didn't like to sit in the front with a lot of the, not that paparazzi were a thing at that time in 55, but it was July of 55. And apparently, according to my dad, he was in the kitchen of the restaurant with Connie's dad, and James Dean walked in with, at the time, as my father said, the most beautiful girl he had ever seen, which was a 18-year-old Ursula Andress.
Mm,
For those of you who need to remember, one of the first
beautiful.
Bond girls. But
Beautiful.
anyway, so he was in there, and my father is holding me, who was not yet 2 years old, in his arms. And James Dean apparently took me from my father's arms, asked him, what's the kid's name? And he said, John Diamore. And James Dean said to him, what do you know? We got the same initials.
Ah,
And handed me back to my father. And that was it. And unfortunately, about 3 months later, James Dean was no longer with us.
Well,
wow.
from what I have read and what I've seen, he had dinner at the Villa Capri the
The night
night
before.
that he had his accident. Yeah.
Yes. The next morning, he drove up to Northern California and unfortunately was killed in a car crash.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he had a great last meal.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. So
Okay, we are at 15 minutes. So I just pulled out the nets and we're flipping them over again. So
okay.
that was the second 15 minutes. So we have two more. I don't
Okay.
know if we're all going to be together when they're done, but
Well, they look
Really?
delicious, and I'm sure they sound like they taste delicious.
I didn't know that it took approximately an hour to bake all that. I just figured
15
after,
minutes 4 times.
yep.
yeah, apparently. Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Connie, in your cookbook. Very curious about some of those recipes, especially the dough, the pizza dough, because that's what makes the pizza, the
Uh-huh.
dough.
and the oven, of course, that it can get hot enough. That's the big thing.
Oh, okay.
So
What do
at
I
the
know?
farmer's market, it's the same oven that they opened with in 1939. She renovated the whole place, but the oven is the same. Isn't that crazy?
Yep.
So the oven has to be hot enough? Is that why they do
Yeah.
the
Oh,
wood
yeah.
burning oven or the
Yeah, it needs to be about 900 plus degrees for it to
Wow.
really, really. I mean, you can do it on your grill outside, which is, have you ever grilled a pizza before? Super fun, super delicious. But you can't quite get it quite hot enough, so it's a little of a different animal. But you know, if you have a pizza stone for your oven, that helps. But it really needs to be really, really hot for it to be like restaurant quality kind of thing.
Right.
Huh. I wouldn't know that.
Obviously, I didn't get the restaurant gene or the cooking gene.
You're the author. You got the author gene.
Yeah, I'll take it. But eating at Connie's house is a treat. I could absolutely tell
bet.
you.
Yeah.
So, but thank you, Connie. You're wonderful. We love you
Thanks.
for coming on, and especially since we did this a few months ago, and let's just call it was our test. And
It was, yeah.
No, we might as well, since you opened the can of worms, you might as well tell the story. We did a show with Connie. It was our very first show. We were so excited to have her. And I am in charge of making sure we record the shows. And I messed up. I didn't record
we
it.
forgot to hit the record button, folks. But
yeah. So
we went
I apologize, but Connie has been such a good sport about it. She said no problem. I feel terrible to this day. But we're glad that we got to
we
do it
love you
again.
for coming on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
We
thanks
love
so
you
much
for
for
coming on,
inviting.
and I hope the next time you come back east, you let me know so I can cook for you.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, it would.
You can use
It
my
would.
cookbook.
Yeah.
Trust me, I'm gonna order it as soon as we get done today. So thank you, and love you, and we hope to let's do this again, but this time let's do it from your art studio.
Yeah,
we
I
do
want
it
to
in
see more about that.
studio.
Yeah.
Yeah, super, super fun. Having a great time. It's weird not being a restaurateur anymore, but I cook at home all the time. And in fact, I made some fabulous focaccia yesterday. I wish you were here to enjoy it.
Is that in the recipe book too?
No, but if you want a recipe, I can send you one.
Yeah, I'll have to get the book.
Focaccia is pretty easy. If you like to make bread, a lot of people don't because it's just so painstaking. It's not an easy thing to do. This is foolproof, super easy to make, and it's delicious.
Yeah,
For
I
sure.
love eating bread, but making it is another story. Like you said,
Yeah,
it's so involved. You have to let it rise and the yeast and all that.
yeah. It's not so difficult. I could send you a recipe, but I think if I had the worst thing that could happen to me is I became gluten free. I just don't know what I would do. You know, bread and pasta, and I feel for those people who can't
I know.
eat those things. It must just be devastating. Food is just such a big part of our lives that
Yeah.
have to sacrifice and not eat bread would be terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Food is good. So,
Well,
well, thanks, Connie. And it's good to talk with you again and again.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a good sport about my mistake and
Oh,
for
no problem.
sharing everything with us.
yes,
All your little stories.
and I hope you enjoy all those nuts that you're making tonight.
Oh yeah, they're going in the mail. They're coming to your place.
Love
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I'll
Send me that
split them
address.
up. Split them up. So send some to Kelly too.
Yep, some to Kelly and some to you.
Aw,
Thank you. Thank you, hon.
You got
Have a
it.
wonderful day. Thank you.
Yeah.
You
Thanks,
too.
Connie.
Thanks so much. We'll see you
Bye-bye.
again. Bye.
Good night.
All views expressed in this video belong to Kelly Nicholson, John D'Amore, and guests. These discussions do not represent the opinions of any entity whatsoever with which they have been affiliated now or will be in the future. The opinions expressed are solely theirs, and since they are critically thinking human beings, these views are subject to change, subject to revision, and subject to rethinking at any time. These conversations are not meant to be taken as advice and are only for the purpose of entertainment. All statements may be based on hearsay and not necessarily valid proof of any claims in this video. It is not our intention to teach or advise on any topic. Unless otherwise noted, all photos are public domain.
Thanks for watching A Slice of Life with Kelly and John.